It is noon now, so we are going to go live now. And Jane, just give me a thumbs up when we're there. Fantastic. Thank you so much. So welcome everybody. This is Career Lab Wednesday. We are here every Wednesday, noon to 1 p.m. We are here to serve you. Any career-related questions, jump into the Zoom link if you can. That's the best way to interact with us. If you can't, type your questions into the comments section and Jane Coletta will get those over to us. We'll do our best to answer those questions. But I want to introduce again Dr. Mike Zwell, who is our Managing Director of the Human Emergence Group at Wright Foundation and who has 42 years of hiring experience, has written a book on it. Dr. Mike Zwell, what would you like to kick us off with today?
Well, I was just reminded of the story of the guy who was, right out of college looking, having an interview at a company, and the recruiter for the company asked, "Well, what are you looking for?" And the guy says, "Well, I'd like $175,000." And the recruiter says, "Well, that's great. And by the way, we also offer a Maserati or a Rolls Royce, depending on your preference. Which do you want?" And the guy says, "God, you must, are you joking?" And the recruiter says, "Yeah, but you started it."
Nice.
So I'm pleased to be here with you. I have a lot of experience in this area. I started in executive search in 1980 and 82. I had 20 years where I had an executive search firm, placing everybody from bankers on up to CEOs. And in 2008, I wrote this book called Six-Figure Salary Negotiation. So I have a fair amount of experience in the subject. And I want to start out by saying, just regarding the mindset. So if you're selling a car, you don't care about the quality of your car that you're selling, right? You basically just want to get as much money as you can. If you're the buyer of the car, you're going to check it out. You're going to take it to a mechanic, probably. You're going to take it on the road. You're going to test drive it. So there's a totally different attitude if you're a buyer or a seller. If you're a seller, you just want, what you can get. If you're a buyer, you're concerned about quality. One of the biggest problems for people in looking for work or in the job market in any way is they act like they're sellers instead of buyers. So you go out there, and I'm sure some of you had this experience where you go to work for a company and then you go, "Holy cow, I should have asked this question. I should have found out more." Because once you get there, you find it isn't what you hoped for because you didn't do your due diligence. So one of the approaches to any new job or any negotiation is to go in as a buyer, not as a seller. Go in with what it is you're looking for, what questions you have, whether people like it or not, what's the culture like. Talk to people who are in the job, in other jobs. That the scarcity mentality of, I just want a job, or it occasionally works and so often doesn't. So go into any situation as a buyer, not as a seller.
Fantastic. Mike, thanks so much. One of the things that we've kind of heard here is, as people go in with a buyer mentality, is that they are serving the conversation more. They're serving the company even before they're working there, because they can ask questions that help the people hiring that are wanting an employee to think through some of the problems. So we've had people who have not gotten the job, but even had the boss or whoever say, "Oh, you helped us realize that we're not really hiring for the right thing." So there's many ways in which you're talking about that we've seen people open up possibilities that they wouldn't have been able to open up if they weren't going at it from buyer mentality.
Yeah. And a lot of it is asking questions. And a lot of it is about establishing rapport. So, way too many people go in and they sit there, or people doing it on remotely. You're waiting for them to ask you questions. I'm an expert on competencies, things like initiative, influence, teamwork, and so on. And the most important differentiating competency in almost every job is results orientation, followed by initiative and influence. So you're going to want to demonstrate with almost any job, those three things: initiative, influence, and results orientation. And the way you do that is by asking questions and telling stories. But if you don't establish rapport, then you're not going to get there. And the way you do that is by getting to know people, getting to know your interviewer, asking questions. What are the biggest challenges the company's facing now? What do you really need in this person to do in this situation? How would you describe your culture? What's it like to work here? You're showing yourself to be a person of substance when you ask these kinds of questions.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Mike. We've got a lot of folks in here, and I'm seeing some questions starting to come into the chat. Joe, I don't know if you can be totally with us, but I would love to hear from you just to see how it's going.
Morning. It's going very well. How you doing, George? I just did a radio show last night with my high school alma mater, talking about what it's like going from high school to police chief and all that entailed. So a lot of reminiscing and things, and careers and what you do. And I was pondering the question of why and how did I get where I am, and the conversation, a lot of it went back to my parents and the values they instilled, and then my spouse and I, and so there's a lot of it's a support team. And earlier the talker was talking about going into sales or buyer and how you interview, and mostly important. But I think selling the culture of your organization every day in what I do, I think is extremely important, not just internally to gain respect of people that don't know me yet, but more importantly, externally to the communities, and understanding that our culture, and we're not perfect, but we're trying. And how do we get there? And how can you help us as a community? So little over a month in the job, lots going on. Not all of it pleasant, but that's the nature of this business. And so we're working through that. So eyes wide open as I get in here, and thank you for all your assistance and help through that year-long process I went through.
What do you do, Joe?
I'm the police chief for the Honolulu Police Department. We're the 19th largest police department in the United States.
Well,
fantastic.
If everything was easy, they wouldn't need you.
Exactly. And if everybody treated everybody with dignity and respect, which is my number one touch point, you wouldn't need us either.
Yeah.
Joe, well, thank you so much.
Thanks, George. I appreciate it.
Thank you for checking in and letting us know how it's going as you're onboarding there.
Will do. I'll hang around for a while, listen to what's going on as I check the news and get ready for my day and what's ahead of me.
Fantastic.
Aloha.
Cool. So Scott, you've got a question, and are you able to come off mute and share your question?
Yeah, I thank you for having me. I apologize. I would say that I'd love to know the questions that could accurately or honestly identify what the culture is like there. How do you take the temperature of the water without them projecting or telling you what you want to hear? For me, I guess I always put the focus on them to see if that's a place where I would want to work, not just I'm here to do a great job. And those questions are important, but I'm not sure how to best sniff that out from the other side.
one way to do that, Scott, is by asking them, like, the ideal successful person here, what kind of person are they? What are they like? Because their answer to that will reflect on the culture. We need somebody who is just a real hard charger. Takes no prisoners. Well, that's one kind of comment. We want somebody who really works well with others, who's a good team player. Now, the other key problem that you have in this is that you cannot count on your interviewer telling you the truth. Okay, so you always want to talk to other people. Can I talk to somebody else on the team?
Or maybe like on LinkedIn.
Yeah, but you want to find this stuff out. And of course, you also have Glassdoor, where you want to hear the dirt on any company. That doesn't, because the Glassdoor is no more accurate than the interviewer, maybe in the opposite direction. Because here you got sour grapes and you got all, but you get to hear the downside as well, because you want as accurate a particular picture as possible. There is no perfect company. Every company, they all have warts. So you just want to know what those warts are, so that you're going in with a as clear a picture as possible.
I love that. Great question, Scott. And those are some great ways to sniff it out and learn more about a company.
There's another thing, which is that do your research on the industry. Because it really matters. If you're going to go work for a trucking firm, you should know what it's like in trucking firms. And you have what's the range of different cultures that you have, because you have industry cultures as well. So there's a lot. There's an understanding the history. For a manufacturing company, what are and then you also have the whole current events issue. How are you dealing with the what's your situation with the pandemic? If it's any kind of manufacturing company, what's your supply chain like? I have a good friend who's a sales manager for a semiconductor company, and her entire job now is dealing with unhappy customers because they can't get what they need for like a year. So you just want to keep asking questions, find out as much as you can.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much. I'm typing another question, so thank you.
Great. So everybody who's joining in, this is Career Lab Wednesday, every Wednesday, noon to 1. We are here Central Time. We invite you to jump in on Zoom if you can, as many of you are doing. That's fantastic. We can work with you directly, but if you can't, type your questions in to the comment section in LinkedIn, and Jane Coletta will get those over to us. And if as you're thinking about what you want to ask, you can be doing like Scott and typing your questions into the chat here on Zoom. So I want to open up the floor to anybody, any questions that you have about your career. How can we serve you today?
George Donald, I just wanted to let you know this is Gordon Medlock, and
hey,
been able to join the call. So if there are other questions that come up, I'll be happy to jump on, but I will be in transit. So just letting you know.
Got you.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gordon. Good to have
Sure.
you here.
Thank you.
Well, we've got another question from Scott, and I'm going to do a countdown. Anybody else before we go to Scott's? 2, 1. Okay, be thinking about what you want to ask, how we can serve you. So Scott, is it fair to ask if your hiring manager will be your long-term boss, or if they are looking to be promoted or move out of their role anytime soon?
Absolutely, it's fair. Whether the answer is going to be meaningful or not is another question. But you can get at it by saying, Mary, how long have you been in your particular position?
I love that. I love that. And the reason I ask in my past, I've moved across the state to work for someone that I thought was an amazing leader. He was only my leader for about 6 months till he was promoted to an operations manager at another plant. And then I inherited someone that had a different vision than Ray and myself. But I didn't ask in the interview, if that was something that was on the horizon. I knew he was ambitious, but my whole point in asking is I wanted to work for him, not a replacement of him 6 months after I moved my family there.
So was it the same company you worked for or a different company?
It was a different automotive company. I was moving from agriculture and construction industries into automotive. So it was a little bit more fast paced and dynamic.
So this does relate to what we call culture. So you probably didn't think of asking the question, but knowing what you know now, in a new company, so how does promotion work here? Do people move around? Which is something that you always should want to know anyhow for any large company. There are companies that you are expected to move wherever they want you. And that if you don't, it's gonna stall your career. And other companies is fine. So there's just so many different questions around understanding the culture of an organization. How is conflict dealt with here?
What's the attitude maybe about conflict? Because sometimes conflict can be a requirement to get to the other side, right? Conflict can happen when everyone cares at the same time, right?
And we happen to be here in the Midwest. We have this disease that's called Midwest nice. And learning to actually, we as a companies that we use that we call, constructive engagement, where you're actually having difficult conversations is a real strength, because there's so. I remember talking to the executive team of a manufacturing company here that said, the C-suite, we could all be sitting in one room, and one person would be moving a pile of bricks from one side of the room to the other, one brick at a time, and everybody else would say, why is he doing it? And nobody would ask. That was the culture. Okay. So, we really want to understand how that is, and how where are they regarding innovation? You have, people who are on the bleeding edge. Then there's a leading edge. Then you have, first followers, and then you have, so how they relate to change. These are all things that you want to know.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'll try to zip it. I'm just curious. I have a ton of questions. I'm curious to see what other people's questions are too. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. So again, you're welcome to just jump on in. You can take yourself off mute and ask a question, or type it into the chat here in Zoom. And anybody on LinkedIn Live, type your questions into the comments section. And I'm seeing some familiar faces. Corey, I definitely want to hear from you. I want to know how it's going. Pamela, great to see you here. I think this is maybe your first time on here. Yeah? Great to have you. Rebecca, good to see you. Oh, Sergi, you've got your hand up.
Hi, George. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Welcome from Sofia, Bulgaria.
Oh, yes. Hi. Actually, I have a little comment on previous question from Scott, and I believe it was a really great question. Thank you, Scott, for it. And as for me, I'd like to some sort of do interview for the interviewer. make this cultural fit, to guess it. And when I'm talking to the hiring manager, not HR manager, to the hiring manager, I am asking him what does he do for his team, and how many people from his team has grown, and what has happened to them, because it's really matter for me. I'm targeting I'd say senior position, and I'm planning my growth within the company, or it could be happen outside. But nevertheless, it's about growth, personal growth. And for me, it's really important to work with my boss and to learn from him. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you, Sergey. That sounds good. Oh, we've got a question from Corey. A question you received recently. Oh, the dreaded "tell me about yourself."
You know, I love that question. I'm going to give you all a $10,000 answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah, hi everybody, my name is Corey Thurman. I'm a senior manager. I work in cybersecurity as a cybersecurity professional and other technology operational roles, right? And so sometimes, well, not sometimes, on 2 occasions, I've received that, tell me about yourself. And the first time I was, it gave me pause. The second time, I think maybe I was like too deep into it, because it was, I don't know, I think the way I handled it was good, but, it was very, I think, like performative, right? Going to other career things, and they're like, oh, so tell me about yourself. And, I was really performative in it. Like, I'm an experienced business technology and cybersecurity solutions professional with 2 decades of leadership and entrepreneurial experience. I founded 2 companies and blah, blah, blah. And I worked for JP Morgan Chase, 270,000 employees. And I thought it was a good moment to brag. And, the manager that was interviewing was like, dude, that's like super amazing. Like, why do you want to work here? That's what I got, right? And at that moment, I was like, because I'm looking to make a change, so I got the tell me about yourself. And then immediately, after I told him about myself, I got the, okay, you're like awesome. Why do you want to work here? And so then they gave me pause about the company. Like, is it terrible there? Like, what am I doing?
So Corey,
Yeah.
okay, I'd like you to be my interviewer, and you ask me to tell me about yourself.
Okay. So Mike, hey, it's great to meet you. Let's go ahead and get started. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I assume you'd like to know about how results-oriented I am. Is that of interest to you?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, let me give you an example of that. So in 2006, I was in a meeting of our senior team, and our CEO had been talking about for like 10 years about wanting to start a graduate school. And I looked around the room and I said, and to myself, I said, I don't know how this is going to happen unless I do it. So I raised my hand and said, I'll start the graduate school. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I figured, well, somebody started graduate school, so it must be possible. And it did take me, that was June of 2006 till October of 2008. We got approved to operate and grant degrees in the state of Wisconsin. And so we've been operating it since 2008.
Nice. I like that.
So what is it I did, Corey?
You answered the question you wanted to answer. You
Right.
you built the rapport right away. You told him like, yeah, I can give you this synopsis of my background, but let me tell you something really specific that I think you all would enjoy knowing about me and how I took initiative. Like there's so much in just that short story.
You got it. So and so I've been, in starting in 1990, I became, I learned about and became an expert in competency-based selection, competency-based interviewing.
Mhm.
And I learned this after developing it and doing it, installing it in companies, when one of my clients, his company got sold, and this is, you're talking about a very senior executive that would normally take months to get a job, and he had a job with another investment bank inside of in a month. And he told me, this is what, so he reverse engineered, which is what I just described, competency-based interviewing. By when you have an interviewer that doesn't really know what they're doing and says, tell me about yourself, you're turning it into a competency-based interview by demonstrating with a story what you can do.
Yeah.
So what you each should do in this situation is have some stories that you've developed that really demonstrate initiative, influence, teamwork, communication, results orientation. So you have that available, and you'll, unless you have a really well-trained interviewer, you'll need to actually take a question like, tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
And you turn into something meaningful.
I love it. That was brilliant.
I mean, it totally was brilliant, and I discovered it. It wasn't my brilliance. It was the people I was working with, my clients. I had another one, a woman who was it was like the wife of a client of mine who was a physical therapist, and she went for a job interview. She ended up getting the job running the agency by doing the exact same thing. She said, well, I assume for this other job, you're looking for somebody who is X, Y, and Z. Is that right? And he said, yeah. Well, let me demonstrate to you how I have X, Y, and Z. And she got a job 2 levels above what she actually went in for.
Wow.
Because remember, people are hungry for somebody who's really competent.
Yeah.
And the best way to demonstrate it is not by saying, well, I'm smart, or I'm this, I'm that. It's by telling stories that actually demonstrate it.
Because facts tell, stories sell.
Right. And there are very few, people, just like in dating, 100% of people lie dating. They do some omission or commission rather than just being totally direct.
True.
So that, but very few people will lie in great detail. So when you're telling a story and giving enough, and you actually can't go on too much. You're in rapport with who you're talking to. So you don't want to go on too much, but you want to get the point across and stay in contact with who you're talking to.
This is great. And we're starting to get some questions about this, about how to tell stories. We've got Gina's mentioning, what if you're telling stories isn't really your style? And Scott's got
let me answer that. Practice.
I don't like doing that. To me, that's disingenuous to me. I don't want to put on a fake show, a dog and pony show for somebody. That's not who I am. I'm just straight to the point. I don't want to, so does that mean I'm out the door because I don't want to tell a story? I want to get a sense of, you gotta, I want to be who I am rather than trying to, again, do something or present myself in a way that's disingenuous to me.
What's you telling of what you've done and telling the truth about it? How is that disingenuous, Gina?
It's in the manner of tell a story, I'm just taking it literally.
So you may want to use a different word other than story, because to me, it's like, it's a narrative. I am absolutely about presenting yourself as you are. I'm not interested at all in people becoming who they're not, because that is a terrible trap.
Yeah.
Because if you go to sell yourself as somebody other than who you are, and you actually get the job, you're going to be in real trouble.
Yeah. I'm just,
So-
I'm focusing on quote unquote story because you got to
And
be.
Yeah, use a different word then, because what I'm saying
Yeah.
is where you're actually going to demonstrate your competence, demonstrate what you're good at by telling about what you've done and what happened, what's the situation.
And it's
By the
interesting.
way, I'll give you another example. This is early on. This is actually the late 80s. So I was working for one of the top banks, and I had a very sort of high profile, wonderful job. And I interviewed 5 different people from Bankers Trust. It's been acquired then. It was another very big bank. They all talked about exactly the same deal. And they all claimed credit for it. But since I knew what was going on, I asked exactly what the role. One of them was a proofreader. One of them was a person who copied it on the copy machine. That's how crazy it was when people were sort of just trying to make themselves something that they're not. And not a single one of them was the actual originator of the deal or the person who structured it. So, if you're the interviewer, your job is to wade through the story, like you talk about, Gina, to find out what really is so. What role did you actually play? What did you do? What were your challenges? What was the success? What were the failures you had? We really want to get to know people. This is not about trying to be something other than who you are. We want you to be the gift of you. And you want to be in a situation where you're going to be well used. It was, I think, George Bernard Shaw who said, like, when I die, I want to be completely used up. I want to have, like, maximally have contributed. And I think we're all looking for that place where we're finding meaning and purpose and being well used.
That is beautiful. Thank you, Gina, for the question around that. In that it's not about being disingenuous. It's about really what the fit is, what the vision is. This is something Dr. Gordon Medlock often talks about, is that your career or the job is a pathway or a vessel for you to become who you can become. And so how does that sync up? I think that's great. So thank you so much for the question. And Mike, for the response, because it is a skill. Learning how to talk about myself is something I've been working on for years. I didn't know that I had gifts that I have, and I was raised to not talk about my gifts because I'm not supposed to brag. I come from a conservative background where you just don't do that kind of thing. So this has been an ongoing journey for me. And I think, our careers are a place for all of us to continue developing. So I'm loving this. Rebecca, I see you've got your hand up. Are you able to come off mute and ask a question?
Yeah, thanks. Gina, I was really empathizing with your situation. I am a mother of a toddler who is a transitioning educator who decided because of COVID that teaching was not where I belonged. And I really struggled to know how to interview well. I like people and I like talking, and I'll be honest, I have treated interviews a lot like first dates. Because that's helped me to have a better understanding of how to approach this. Like, this is a person who wants to know me and I want to know them, and we're trying to figure out if we get along enough to want to know each other more. And that has really helped me reframe how I think about the process of interviewing. And I don't know if that will be useful to you. I happen to be one of those very weird people who actually enjoyed first dates because I enjoy meeting new people. But it took a lot of pressure off me because I feel like this is like there's no strings attached, right? If we don't like each other, we don't ever have to talk to each other again. And I feel that the interviewing is the same way. But this time around, I'm the primary wage earner in my family. My partner is an artist. And so I've been feeling a lot of pressure to get a good job that pays a good amount of money. But I also decided that I was tired of trying to conform to what people expected. And I was going to bring my whole Northern Midwestern self to the table, which meant if they asked a stupid question or one that I didn't understand, I was just going to ask them to ask in a different way. And I was going to tell them what I needed when they asked what I needed. And if they asked if I had a failure, I was going to be honest. And I know all the stuff about spin and stuff like that. And I have helped a lot of people learn how to be better interviewers and things like that. But I think for me personally, as a woman, it's taken a lot of courage to go in and say, I'm going to talk to this person just like they're a person that I want to know. And I'm going to take the pressure off of me to have to perform a certain way because it's a job interview. But it is a really, it feels really dangerous and it feels really vulnerable. And so trying to find that balance between putting your best foot forward and also being honest has been, I don't know, it's been complicated for me. And so I think, I don't know, maybe something that I would be interested in this conversation is to hear a little bit more about how to gracefully handle when you have very real like complications about taking roles. I mean, I actually had to have a really awkward conversation with a hiring manager because they didn't expect my role to be like the primary benefits provider. And so their benefits were really horrible and very expensive. But I was the responsible for providing health insurance for my family through my employment. And so I don't know that I handled that conversation particularly well. It was a good interview process and we had a lot of honest conversation across the board. But I am curious about how to do that. I noticed I think I saw the thing about that maybe the conversation was going to talk a little bit about salary negotiations, but I feel like for me personally, I am really struggling to know how to negotiate benefits from a position of a primary wage earner, often in roles that are considered support roles where they don't expect a primary wage earner to be.
Mm.
So let me thank you very much, Rebecca. So in this book that I wrote, Six-Figure Salary Negotiation, I actually wrote like 3 chapters of it. And then I had experts in different elements of the hiring process. And one of them was a benefits expert. So there's a chapter here on benefits. So there are things that you can negotiate and things that you just can't negotiate. You know, for example, a lot of it, you just can't, you know, it's company policy and you can't negotiate. One of the benefits that you can more likely negotiate is weeks of vacation. That's something that that individual hiring managers or HR may have flexibility about with some companies. Health insurance generally is not one that you can really negotiate. It's just because it's generally a bigger policy, and there's all kinds of traps that companies will fall in if they give you something they're not giving somebody else. And they're not going to do it. So I think, Rebecca, in that kind of thing, you know, you're going to want to find out as early as possible as to what their benefit package is, you know, what the health insurance policies are. And the only way around that really is by salary negotiation. In other words, you can make it up by an increase in salary if they want you. That's the way to go primarily around things like health insurance, just because there's not typically flexibility in that.
Yeah, that's what I did, and it ended up that because of the cost of their insurance, they couldn't meet me at a salary that worked for me, and so we had to part ways. But it was a conversation that was so awkward, and I just wasn't sure even how to have it. And so I've been trying to be really transparent now with hiring managers and early in the interview stage that as the primary wage earner, their benefits are going to be a major deciding factor for me, so that they know right off the bat. And so we can have that conversation earlier sometimes about like what kind of benefits they offer and how they do that. And that's helped a little bit, but I just wasn't sure if there was practices that you recommended around that.
And there's no need for it to be awkward. You know, you're a human being, you're in a particular situation with your family, you have needs, and that's totally appropriate. You know, to put those out, and there always is a timing question around this kind of thing. You know, you don't want to be too demanding too early, because it doesn't fit the culture. You know, it's like it's not what we do. You know, it's like you want to bait the hook. You want them to grab the hook, using the fishing metaphor. You know, you want them to want you before you start making, you know, too many demands, but you don't want to wait too long, Because then it's like, then it's a waste, you know, why waste my time and your time?
This is fantastic. And, you know, I want to add one thing here, Rebecca. I think you totally get what Mike's saying. And sometimes that awkwardness stuff is, you know, like what I was mentioning about coming from a conservative place. So just being aware of that, that I'm going to have feelings, I'm going to feel afraid and that kind of thing. But like what Mike said is, there's no reason to in the current situation, but sure, I might have unfinished business or baggage or something that I can just be conscious of while I'm going into a new situation. I love how you went into it and how you're doing it, and that you're bringing this here. Want to remind everybody, you know, who, as you're listening in, we're all learning vicariously. So lots of people here on the Zoom call and then on LinkedIn Live are what we call co-voyaging or learning vicariously with you. So that's just a fantastic question and what you're working through there, Rebecca. Thank you. And we've got, we're coming into the last 19 minutes here. So I want to get all of us popping in with our questions as we can. I know Scott's got some more. Julia, or I don't know if I'm saying your name right, about negotiating within your current company. All great questions. So jump on in, come off mute and jump in.
So let me address that one about negotiating within your current company. The first thing I would always want to do is to find out what your culture and what your policies are. You know, because is it a common thing? Do people get, you know, some company, you know, some companies, and certainly for educational institutions, you know, if you get a master's degree, you get an automatic bump in your salary. If you get a doctorate, you get a bump in your salary. You get those kinds of things. So finding out, you know, even before you go and get the credential or get the certificate, find out what the policy is. You're much better off negotiating before you have it than when you get it. And by the way, you know, today is the best time to negotiate than we've had in probably in my lifetime.
Whoa.
So
30 years.
because there are so many resignations that are happening, because there are people who don't want to go back to work in an office or want to go remotely. You know, we have the inflation rate going on, which is scary on the one hand. On the other hand, salaries are going up.
Your best life.
And the cost of losing somebody is very high right now. So you're going to have opportunity just by saying it and asking. You know,
Dr. Zwell, is it safe to say that the cost of replacing these professionals that are leaving, in some cases, it's more than $20,000, like to replace and fix once signing bonuses and benefits are established? There's a lot of pressure there.
There's a lot of different ways of calculating it. I've seen it calculated. It's actually the cost of when you're salaried. If you actually look at, if you really fully load it, which is like for a lot of jobs, it takes 6 months on the job
To get up to speed.
to even become effective.
Yeah.
So it's very expensive to replace somebody for lots of positions, as well as all the time that it's open and the lost productivity that you have when you don't have anybody in the job. So this is not about saying, you know, holding people hostage and threatening, because I don't recommend that at all. But you know, there are very subtle ways of saying, you know, I've gotten this certificate and you know, and I've done it so that I can be a better contributor to the company, and I'm wondering if this can help me get a promotion or an increase in salary. And then the key thing you do is to be quiet and let them talk. one of the things that you may do in your own anxiety is to keep talking. Bad idea. You know, in any negotiation, you know, the classic thing is the person who speaks first loses, right? So you want to make your case and then you want to not say a thing.
Karis training for negotiation was one of my favorite because I had never been trained on that. And when you shut up after throwing your anchor point, making the point of it, it's very hard to pause. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Thank you.
And another aspect of salary negotiation where this is relevant is, you know, you've gone through the interview process and you like them and they like you and they say, so what are you looking for? Okay. And unless you're very, very clear on what it is you want and you don't want to take anything less or whatever, you're usually much better off than saying, in fact, you could even tell the joke that I told at the beginning of this session, you know, well, you can use humor. Well, you know, I'd like $750,000, but it's probably not realistic. So I'm interested in what you, what's the best offer that you can make me. Or you can say things like, you know, I want what's, you know, in a large company, you know, I'm interested, you know, what's the salary range for this particular job? What's, you know, what's the low point? What's the high point? What's the midpoint? And where do you generally hire people? You know, so there's this whole thing called anxiety transfer. Okay. And what you want to do is you want to transfer the anxiety to the interviewer, to the company. So
I love that.
Just different ways to do it. So, you know, you want, and by the way, I've had, yeah, when I first went into search, a long time ago, I talked to a guy who was an accountant and he was working for one of the main, you know, the top accounting firms. And he got a job for working for a cleaning, you know, a cleaning company. $10,000 over his peers. He took the money. It was great. Except it was just a trap, a career trap. Because there was no place for him to go in the organization. He was sort of the top accountant in a small company. And nobody else would hire him because he was making too much money. You know, so there's just a lot to think about. You know, he said, I'll take less. Well, why would I hire him who's going to take less money? He's not going to be happy rather than a peer of his for whom it's going to be a salary increase. So there's just a lot at play here.
Yes, and there's so much going on in the chat, and I think with everybody, this is awesome. Career Lab Wednesday, noon to 1 p.m. Central. Love the engagement. Thank you, Jane, for putting the link where people can review this. Also, I want to say to continue this and take the next level. Our founder, Dr. Bob Wright, is going to be hosting a webinar very soon, Transformational Leadership. Go to that. Continue this because we're not going to have enough time in the next 10 minutes and go deeper with that. Skills with learning how to be silent. It totally is an internal game. And so I'm happy to see that, Scott, yeah, you said it's hard. If I'm lying to myself and saying, okay, great, I'm just going to do that, I'm probably not going to be successful at it. This stuff is doesn't necessarily come easy, but it is doable.
You need to practice. You need to practice some of those things, though. You really do, in my opinion.
Yep. So we've got 10 minutes left. I know I'm not tracking all the questions that I have here. Jump on in if you've got questions. I've got Felicia asking a question about automated talent scouts.
George, I have a quick question that ties to Gina and the tell me about yourself.
Yep.
Okay, when I've in the past tried to communicate my value, I've just thought that talk was cheap, that anyone could say anything. Like Dr. Zwell's story about 3 different people telling the same story from different vantage points and wanting the credit. So for me, I've taken like, I guess I keep project trophies. Like, so this is from John Deere, right? So I did project work, right, where I had to engineer solutions, create different tools, create different production lines, improve and automate tools, right? So I can show my work, right? Like if we had to create certain robots to do certain things, we could do that. We had to calculate the labor standard for the union to approve. We could do that too. And I guess I'm dating.
Scott, let me interrupt you a second. That's great, but you want to do it in rapport with who you're talking to. You can,
right.
You can overdo it. So you really want to find out. So the other aspect of interviewing is you want to find out what they want. You know, if you hire the ideal person, what problem is they going to solve? Are they going to solve for you? And then you want to direct your answer towards what their problem is. Because you can actually be shooting yourself in the foot by showing how great you are in something that they don't care about.
Yep.
Right
and depending on who's interviewing you, they might not help you with that. If they're, you know, depending on their personality style, etc., they might not give you any signals that they're not really paying attention to you and they've already blown you off. And so, yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Mike.
Yeah, I just mean if the job description's calling for set experience in PMP and different projects, if you had things aligned that you could show your work and how you saved $32 million with projects just like that. And in my past, I've used that to communicate.
That's great. That's wonderful. The first thing I say, would you like to see what I've done in this area?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then they say yes, and then you do your presentation. Absolutely, that's great.
I just mean like for Gina, she didn't feel comfortable telling her story because she didn't want to.
No.
She didn't.
You're wrong. You got that wrong. So it's making me sound inept in explaining, telling about who I am. I'm very proficient in doing that. I keep on hearing and reading about storytelling. I'm not a storyteller. I'm just me, and I communicate in a manner that best, depicts me. As Rebecca had stated, she goes in and just is herself. And I've been doing this in the past 5 interviews that I've had, and I feel more in control with that. And I really appreciate that Rebecca said, yeah, it makes you feel vulnerable, but I think it's gotten me further with feeling good about myself and also having more control within that discussion in an interview. Where I don't feel like I'm trapped, where I got to sit there and provide a dog and pony show, which I hate to put it in that terms, but
Totally. That sounds great. Mike, I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I'm responding to Gina's comment about interviewers who dominate the entire conversation. See, most people are not trained at all to be interviewers, and they do so many do a really lousy job. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like, okay, I want to talk, so I'm going to talk the whole friggin' time. And you're just looking like, you're supposed to be looking interested in that kind of stuff. And then it may happen that because you look like you have lots of good attention, I'm going to think you're a great candidate, which is ridiculous. You're going to want to do the kind of thing as if they asked you a good question. One way to do this, would you like to, we got 15 minutes left in the interview. Would you like to hear some about me and my background? Yeah. Let me give you an example of the kind of thing that I've done. And then you tell your narrative or whatever. Because it's challenging when you got people that don't know what they're doing. You don't get anywhere, I mean, it's very hard to get value out of it.
And so I'm hearing again, you're the buyer. And in this case, you might have to be the leader in the interview, and you might have to do it with a great deal of rapport and noticing the other person and getting in a way that's not offensive to them, which is quite a skill. So great. We have 5 minutes left. Thank you everybody so much for joining in, for the engagement. I freaking love this. And the way that you're going at these questions and really thinking it through and dealing with the challenges of it. Thank you everybody who's sharing. You're serving everybody who's been viewing in on this. I really appreciate your contribution. Dr. Mike Zwell, thank you so much for being here, working with us today. To continue this, we'll be back next week, noon to 1 p.m. Also, check out Transformational Leadership, deepen your skills there. And we've got just a few minutes left. I want to get anybody in who's got a burning question. We've got Gina, how can we improve the bad behavior of companies? Whoa.
In regards to interviewing, I forgot to put that in there. I don't know if that's something to address, if there's something that collectively everybody can start doing, because ghosting, that's the biggest thing that I found. And like I said, as was mentioned here, your interviewer, yes, they haven't been trained to interview, but they're from HR, for Pete's sake. Let the the interviewee speak so that you can really learn about them, and it becomes a two-way street where you can both decide, are you good, instead of one way, a good fit. I'm just finding a lot of bad behavior in regards to that with companies and interviewing processes are bad. Canceling 10 minutes or 5 minutes before a scheduled interview, not sending an email and just sending another rescheduling invite.
Gina, I just had an idea of something you might try. Can I share it?
Yes.
You might ask, I mean, even with, I'm kind of boiling down what Mike said from the beginning, but can I help you get the most from me in this interview?
No.
Like, can I, and so getting their permission to really take the lead on it and walk them through, and they might just be talking because they don't know what the hell they're doing. And they might be so relieved to have you take over. I don't know, but I just kind of pictured that, because you're bright, focused, driven, all of that stuff. So, you leaning into your gifts, but sharing that, letting people know what you're doing, getting their buy off on it might really help.
Yeah, I like that.
A couple other things. By the way, Pamela, it's so good to see you again in years. So you also do want to have the interviewer talk about themselves. You want to, a lot of people want to talk about themselves. So you want to get that in also, and not just have them ask you questions. How long have you worked here? What's the best thing about the company for you from your perspective? The taking charge of the interview to the extent that's, and there aren't any there's no rule about this. You're always looking at the particular situation to see what's going to work here. But I would always want to get to know the person some. But then again, there's a point at which I'm going to want to say, okay, enough about you. You want to know about me. Obviously not going to say it that way, but to find an elegant way to do transitions. And by the way, one of the best way to do transitions in the interview is with compliments. The best way to interrupt somebody who's just going on and on is you interrupt with a compliment. I'm so glad you've been telling me this. It's really interesting. Thank you so much. And, I assume, given the limited time we have, that you'd like me to talk some about me and my qualifications also. Is that right? So you interrupt with a compliment. And as Gina just put in the chat, it ain't always going to work,
Right on.
If you're in the job market for a long time, you're going to come up with a lot of stories of what's happened, and And sense of humor is a very good thing to have in the interview process, by the way.
Fantastic. We got to end this. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, everybody, for jumping in. This is available to review. Join us next week. Jump into transformational leadership.
And I have
Love
another
seeing
call,
so
so I
many of
gotta
you.
go. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Mike Zwell. Thanks for jumping in today. And really appreciate your engagement. Love seeing you return and seeing your development. You know, I've worked with a lot of people and find that as people are in this group and using other tools, that they get results. So keep working it. We'll see you next week. Take care.